The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched so far that the ceiling disappeared into artificial clouds. 1,000 different species filled the chamber, each representative sitting in specialized seats designed for their unique bodies. Some breathed methane, others required extreme cold, and a few existed as energy patterns contained in crystalline matrices. But they all turned their attention to the small group of humans. Standing at the center platform, Haiyan Wu had served as Earth's ambassador for 12 years. His hair had gone gray during that time, and deep lines marked his face. He wore the simple blue uniform of the human diplomatic corps, with no decorations except a small pin showing Earth and its moon. Behind him stood Captain Yuna, her military dress uniform crisp and perfect, and Chief Scientist Tai Yang, who carried a data tablet but seemed more interested in studying the alien faces around them. The Vrathan Overseer loomed above them all, his massive insectoid body supported by 6 powerful legs. His compound eyes reflected the lights of 1,000 worlds as he clicked, his mandibles together in what might have been anger or impatience. The sound echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. Ambassador Haiyan Wu. The Overseer's voice came through translation devices worn by every being present. Humanity stands accused of violating Protocol 17. You have developed a military technology and refuse to share it with the Council. This is a direct violation of our most sacred laws. Every species must contribute their defensive advances to the common good. Your refusal is an act of aggression against this body. Haiyan Wu stood perfectly still. He had expected this confrontation for months. The quantum disruption technology was humanity's answer to the Void Swarm. Those terrible creatures that had nearly destroyed the galaxy 30 years ago. Humans had lost billions in that war. They had sacrificed entire colonies. They had pushed their species to the breaking point, and in that desperation, they had created something new. Honored Overseer Haiyan Wu began, his voice calm and clear. Humanity does not refuse to protect the Council. We have deployed our forces to defend Council space more than any other species. We have answered every call for help. We have shared medical technology, agricultural advances, and countless other innovations. But this particular technology is different. It is dangerous. In the wrong hands, it could destroy entire star systems. We are willing to use it in defense of the Council, but we cannot give it away freely. A chorus of angry sounds erupted from the assembled representatives. A Kelthran delegate, her scales flashing red with rage, rose from her seat. We hear the same human arrogance. You think yourself superior? You think we cannot be trusted? For 300 years, humans have acted as if they are the guardians of the galaxy. We are tired of your condescension. More voices joined hers. The Morgothi representative, a being of living metal, spoke in a voice like grinding gears. Humans take too much upon themselves. They decide what is dangerous. They decide what we can know. This is not partnership. This is dictatorship. Haiyan Wu listened to it all without changing expression. He had heard these arguments before, in smaller meetings and private conversations. The resentment had been building for years. Some species felt that humanity had too much influence in the Council. Others were jealous of human technological progress. A few simply disliked the fact that humans often ended up mediating disputes between older, supposedly wiser species. When the chamber finally grew quiet, Haiyan Wu spoke again. We understand your frustration. We truly do. But ask yourselves this question. 30 years ago, when the Void Swarm came, who stood at the front lines? Who lost the most ships, the most soldiers, the most civilians? Humanity paid the price for this galaxy's survival. We learned lessons written in the blood of our people. We are asking you to trust that we learned them well. The Vrathan Overseer's mandibles clicked faster. Trust is not the issue. Law is the issue. You will comply with Protocol 17, or you will face the consequences. The Council has voted. Without consulting us, Captain Yuna spoke for the first time, her voice sharp. You held the vote before we even arrived for this meeting. Uncomfortable silence fell. It was true. The Council had decided humanity's fate before giving them a chance to speak. The trial was just theater, a show of unity against the species that had become too influential.
Out.
Too important, too human. The overseer spread his upper limbs wide. The vote was unanimous among all council members. Humanity must surrender the quantum disruption technology within 30 standard days, or face military action to seize it. You will also face expulsion from this council and economic sanctions against all human worlds. This is our final decision. Haiyan Wu closed his eyes for just a moment. Behind him, he heard Taiyang shift his weight slightly. Yuna remained perfectly still, but he knew her well enough to sense her anger. They had all known this might happen. They had hoped it would not. But humans had learned long ago that hope was not a strategy. When Haiyan Wu opened his eyes, something had changed in his expression. The diplomatic mask was gone, replaced by something harder and colder. He gathered the documents from the podium in front of him and placed them carefully in his case. Then he looked up at the overseer and the 1,000 representatives watching. "Very well," he said quietly. "Humanity hears the will of this council. We will not comply with your demands. We will not surrender technology that could be misused. And we will not remain where we are, not trusted or respected." He turned to leave, but paused and looked back over his shoulder. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. We will remove all our personnel, all our technology, and all our military forces from Council space within your demanded 30 days. We bear no anger toward you. We wish you well. But we will not be dictated to, and we will not be threatened. May fortune favor your paths. The 3 humans walked toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed in the sudden, complete silence of the chamber. Not a single representative spoke. Not one called them back. The massive doors opened before them, and they stepped through into the corridor beyond. Behind them, the Galactic Council sat in stunned disbelief. Many had expected the humans to argue more, to beg, to compromise. Some had thought the threat alone would force compliance. None had truly believed that humanity would simply walk away from 3 centuries of partnership. As the doors closed behind the departing humans, the Vrathan overseer looked across the chamber. "The council has spoken," he said, though his voice carried less certainty than before. "Humanity has made its choice." In the corridor, Haiyan Wu walked between Yuna and Taiyang. None of them spoke until they reached their shuttle. Only when the doors sealed and they were alone did Yuna ask the question, "Sir, are we really doing this?" Haiyan Wu looked out the viewport at the massive council station, at the ships of 1,000 worlds docked at its arms, at the lights of the greatest political achievement in galactic history. Then he activated his communication device. "Fleet Command, this is Ambassador Haiyan Wu. Initiate Protocol Exodus. Bring everyone home." The order went out across the galaxy in seconds, and humanity began to leave. The message reached every human outpost, station, and settlement across the galaxy within 6 hours. Protocol Exodus was not new. Every human in Council space had been briefed on it during their orientation. Most had assumed it would never be used. They were wrong. Admiral Dejung received the order aboard the flagship Indomitable, currently stationed at the border between Council space and the disputed zone. He was a career military officer who had fought in 3 wars and countless smaller conflicts. He had defended Council worlds, rescued Council citizens, and trained Council officers. Now he was being ordered to abandon all of it. He read the message 3 times before accepting it was real. Then he stood and addressed his bridge crew. "All hands, this is the Admiral. We have received Fleet Order 7. All human vessels are to return to human territory immediately. Begin preparation for departure. We leave in 12 hours. The crew stared at him in shock. His first officer, Commander Bong Su, spoke carefully. "Sir, what about the defense platforms? What about our patrol routes? The Morgothi have been making aggressive moves. If we leave now, they are no longer our concern," Dejun interrupted. "We have been dismissed from Council service. Gather our people and prepare the ships." That is all. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. At Threshold Station, the largest trade hub in Council space, Commander G1 oversaw the human contingent. The Threshold was a marvel of engineering, a massive structure that housed over 3 million beings from hundreds of species. Humans had helped build it 50 years ago. Human engineers maintained its core systems. Human security forces kept the peace in its more dangerous sections. Guan called her department heads together in the station's human sector. "We're leaving," she told them simply. "Pack personal items only. Everything else stays. We have 72 hours. Her chief engineer, a man named Kang Min, who had worked on Threshold for 20 years, looked stricken. "Commander, the station's power systems, the life support algorithms, the defense grid. I'm the only one who fully understands how they integrate. If we just leave, we leave behind all documentation," Jiwan said firmly. "Every manual, every schematic, every training program. We've fared to train station personnel for years. The Council always said it was unnecessary, that it was humanity's job to maintain these systems. That job has ended." Within an hour, the station's administrator, a Kelthran named Viseth, came storming into the human sector. His scales were bright orange with agitation. "Commander G1, I've just been informed that you are evacuating. This is unacceptable. You have contracts. You have obligations." Giwan met his anger with calm professionalism. "Administrator, those contracts were made with council members. Humanity is no longer a member. The contracts are therefore void. We will complete our departure in an orderly fashion and leave behind everything you need to continue operations." Viseth's tail lashed behind him. "The defense grid alone requires constant human oversight. Your people have refused to train anyone else on it. Claiming it is too complex, we have offered training every year for the past decade," G1 corrected gently. "Each time your administration rejected the offer, stating that human personnel were required to maintain the systems as part of our council obligations. We are no longer obligated." The truth of her words struck Viseth silent. He had indeed rejected those training proposals, seeing them as unnecessary expenses when humans were already doing the work. Now he understood the mistake. On the agricultural world of Preston 4, a planet that had been barren rock before human terraformers arrived, Engineer Minji supervised the last of the human operations. She had spent 15 years turning Preston into a garden world. The native Priscillian people had welcomed humanity with gratitude and friendship. They had worked side by side to create something beautiful. Now the Priscillian governor stood in her office, not angry, but desperate. "Minji, please. You do not have to follow this order. We will grant you citizenship. We will pay you anything you ask. You are family to us. Stay." Atia felt tears in her eyes, but she shook her head. "Governor, you honor me more than you know, but I am human. My people have been cast out, and I will not abandon them. Everything we have built here is yours. Every technique, every genetic modification, every treatment schedule is documented. Your people are smart and capable. You will maintain what we started, but you understand it in ways we do not," the governor pleaded. "The soil treatments, the atmospheric processors, the crop rotations. We can follow instructions, but you understand the principles. Without that understanding, then you will learn," Minji said gently. "The same way humanity learned, through trial and error, through patience, through dedication. We believe in you." The governor left defeated, and Mingi allowed herself one moment of grief before returning to her departure checklist at the council. Military Academy on Zenther Prime. Colonel Ginho prepared to leave behind 15 years of teaching. He had trained thousands of officers from dozens of species. He had written the textbooks they studied. He had revolutionized council military doctrine with strategies that saved countless lives. His students gathered to say goodbye, confused and upset. A young Vrathan officer named Cleth stepped forward. "Colonel, why must you go? You have done nothing wrong. It is the council leadership who made this decision, not us. We want you to stay." Ginho put a hand on the young officer's shoulder, a gesture of affection that crossed species boundaries. "I know, Cleth. But sometimes principles matter more than friendships. My people were not trusted. We were threatened. We cannot stay where we are not respected, no matter how much we care for individuals like you." He handed Cleth a data chip. "This contains everything I have ever taught, plus lessons I plan for the next 5 years. Use it well. Teach others. And remember that strategy is not about memorizing moves. It is about understanding why those moves work. In hospitals across council space, human doctors like Su Yang transferred their patients to local care. She spent hours with each case, explaining treatments and procedures to alien colleagues who suddenly realized how much they had relied on human expertise. One patient, a Kelthran child with a rare genetic disorder, clung to Su Yang's hand. "Doctor, please don't go." "You made the pain stop." "The other doctors do not know how." Su Yang knelt beside the child's bed, fighting her own emotions. "I have taught Dr. Vressel everything I know about your condition. He is smart and caring. He will take good care of you. I promise." But as she left the hospital for the last time, she wondered if that promise was one she could keep. On day 28 of the 30-day deadline, the last human transport departed from council space. Admiral Daiyung watched from the bridge of his flagship as thousands of human vessels formed up in a massive convoy. Civilian ships, military cruisers, transport vessels, science ships, and personal craft. All heading home, he opened a final channel to Council Command. "This is Admiral Daijun of the Human Defense Fleet. All human personnel have been evacuated from Council space. All installations have been transferred to local control. All documentation has been provided. We leave behind no sabotage, no traps, no revenge. We simply leave." There was a long pause before the Council Coordinator responded. "Acknowledged, Admiral. Safe travels." Daijun closed the channel and gave the order. "All ships jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Jump." Space twisted and bent as thousands of human ships vanished from Council space, heading for the borders of human territory. Behind them, they left silence and a galaxy that was about to discover just how much it had depended on them. On Earth, Ambassador Haiyan-Wu stood in the reception hall where he had first been briefed for his posting to the Council so many years ago. Now he was home, and humanity was alone again. His successor, Ambassador Su Jin, stood beside him. "Sir, do you think they will realize their mistake?" Haiyan-Wu watched the news feeds showing the massive fleet arriving in human space. "Eventually," he said quietly, "but by then, it may be too late." The first crisis struck exactly 9 days after the last human left Council space, the Morgothi. Empire had been watching the human withdrawal with great interest. They were an aggressive species, always seeking to expand their territory. For decades, they had been held in check by the threat of Council intervention and the knowledge that human, strategic advisors would coordinate any response against them. Now, with humanity gone, they saw opportunity. The attack came at dawn on the border world of Kelthran 7. Morgothi. Warships dropped out of hyperspace and began orbital bombardment before the defense systems even registered their presence. The Kelthran government screamed for Council help, invoking the mutual defense treaties that had protected them for centuries. The Council convened an emergency session. The Vrothan Overseer called for an immediate military response. A vote was held to deploy peacekeeping forces. And that is when everything fell apart. The debate that should have taken an hour stretched into days. Without human diplomats to mediate, old grudges surfaced. The Priscillian delegation refused to support any measure that benefited the Kelthran, remembering a trade dispute from 50 years ago. The Zenthari wanted guarantees that their own borders would be reinforced first. Smaller species demanded voices in the planning that major powers refused to grant. By the time the Council finally authorized a military response, the Morgothi had occupied 4 Kelthran worlds. Admiral Vreshk, a Kelthran officer who had trained under Colonel Jinho, led the Council fleet into battle. He had studied human tactics, learned human strategies, and thought he understood the principles. The reality proved different. The battle at Kelthran 7 was a disaster. Vreshk tried to implement a flanking maneuver he had seen humans use successfully, but he did not understand that the maneuver required precise timing and communication between ships. Half his fleet arrived early, the other half late. The Morgothi picked them apart one group at a time. The Council lost 37 ships in 4 hours. It was the worst military defeat in 200 years. Meanwhile, at Threshold Station, Administrator Visith faced a different kind of crisis. The power grid that humans had maintained so carefully began to fail. Warning alarms sounded in sectors throughout the massive structure. But the alien engineers could not understand what the alarms meant. Kong Min, the human engineer, had left behind detailed documentation. But the documentation assumed a level of basic knowledge that the station's current engineers did not have. It was like giving someone a manual for repairing a fusion reactor when they had never seen electricity before. The first major blackout hit residential Sector 7, plunging 300,000 beings into darkness. Life support systems switched to backup power, but those systems were also failing because no one understood how to properly maintain them. Visith tried desperately to contact the humans. He sent messages to Earth, to human colonies, to any human facility he could find. The responses were all the same. Automated messages stating that humanity was no longer affiliated with Council operations, and politely directing him to the documentation that had been provided on Preston 4. Governor Tellish watched his world dying. The crops that Mingy and her team had engineered were failing. The plants were turning brown. The soil was becoming toxic. Nothing they tried seemed to help. Tellish had Mingy's documentation. He had her detailed schedules and procedures. But he did not understand why those procedures worked. When unexpected problems arose, he had no idea how to adapt. A fungal infection spread through the main crop fields. Mingy's notes mentioned antifungal treatments, but they were not working. Tellish did not know that the treatments required adjustment based on soil pH levels, and that those levels changed with the seasons. By the time he figured it out, a quarter of the planet's crops were destroyed. Famine projections appeared on his desk. Within 6 months, Preston 4 would be unable to feed its population. The beautiful garden world that humans had created was reverting to barren rock, and the Priscillians could only watch helplessly. The medical crisis spread across Council space like a plague, in hospitals everywhere. Alien doctors struggled with treatments and procedures that humans had made look easy. On Zenther Prime, Dr. Vressel tried to treat the Kelthrin child that Su Yang had left in his care. He followed her instructions exactly. He administered the medications precisely as she had specified. But the child was getting worse, not better. What Vressel did not know was that the treatment required constant adjustment based on the child's hormone levels. Su Yang had done these adjustments instinctively, based on years of experience and subtle signs that Vressel had never learned to recognize. By the time he realized something was wrong, the child had slipped into a coma. The child died 3 days later. Vressel sat in his office and wept, holding the data chip that Su Yang had given him. All the knowledge in the galaxy meant nothing if you did not understand how to use it. Trade throughout. Council space collapsed into chaos. Human logistics officers had spent decades optimizing supply routes, balancing cargo loads, and predicting demand. They had used complex algorithms and intuitive understanding to keep goods flowing smoothly across thousands of worlds. Without them, the system broke down. Ships arrived at stations to find their cargo bays already full. Other stations ran out of basic supplies because shipments were delayed or sent to wrong destinations. Prices fluctuated wildly as shortages and surpluses appeared randomly across the galaxy. The economic damage reached trillions of credits within the first month. Businesses failed. Governments struggled to feed their populations. Anger and fear spread like fire. The Council tried to address each crisis separately, but new problems emerged faster than old ones could be solved. Every solution seemed to create 2 new complications. The complex machinery of galactic civilization, so carefully maintained by human expertise, was falling apart in the Council chambers. The Vrathan Overseer faced a revolt from smaller member species. They blamed him for driving humanity away. He blamed them for not supporting stronger military action. Everyone blamed someone else, and nothing got done. Counselor Minho watched it all from the public gallery. He was human by birth, but had renounced his citizenship years ago to take an independent position in the Council bureaucracy. He had stayed when the others left, believing that he could help bridge the gap. Now, He sat alone, watching the council he had served tear itself apart. A Priscillian delegate named Corvin approached him after one particularly bitter session. The delegate looked exhausted and desperate. "Minho, you must help us. You must convince your people to return. We are dying out here. Preston 4 will starve. Threshold Station is failing. Our fleets cannot defend us. Please." Minho looked at the alien with sad eyes. "I am not my people anymore, Corvin. I gave up my citizenship to stay here, as the council required. And even if I had not, humanity does not respond to desperate pleas. You demanded they leave. They left. But surely they see what is happening to us." "Oh, they see," Minho interrupted bitterly. "They have sensors and intelligence networks. They know about every crisis, every failure, every death, and they are doing nothing, because this is no longer their problem." "You made absolutely certain of that." Corvin's face showed confusion and growing horror. "They would let us die? After centuries of cooperation?" "You let them be threatened and insulted," Minho said quietly. "You demanded their most dangerous technology. You voted to take it by force. You never asked why they were so careful with it. You never trusted that they might know something you did not. And when they tried to explain, you called it arrogance." He stood and gathered his things. "Humanity learned a long time ago that you cannot help people who do not want to be helped. You cannot protect people who see protection as control. You cannot share knowledge with those who demand it as tribute. The council chose pride over wisdom. Now you are learning what that choice costs." Minho left Corvin sitting alone in the empty gallery and walked out into a galaxy that was slowly dying. In human space, reports of the council's struggles arrived daily. Some humans felt sympathy. Many felt vindication. All of them wondered what would come next. Ambassador Sujin read the intelligence briefings with growing concern. The council was failing faster than even worst-case projections had predicted. At this rate, galactic civilization itself might collapse within a year. She brought her concerns to the human leadership. "Not our problem. Not anymore." But Sujin could not shake the feeling that something worse was coming. Something that would make the current crisis look small by comparison. The deep space monitoring station at the galactic rim was automated, so no one was present when the sensors detected the anomaly. The readings were analyzed by artificial intelligence, classified as a priority alert, forwarded to the nearest council military post. But that post was understaffed and overwhelmed with the Morgothi crisis. The report sat in a queue for 3 days before anyone read it. By then, 17 colony worlds had gone silent. In human space, the alert arrived immediately. The monitoring network that humanity maintained for their own borders was far more sophisticated than anything the council had. When the signatures appeared, artificial intelligence flagged them. Human analysts confirmed them, and Admiral Daejun was awakened in the middle of the night with the news. "The Void Swarm," his intelligence officer said simply, displaying the sensor data on the screen above his bed. "Initial estimates suggest a force 3 times larger than the incursion 30 years ago." Daejung stared at the screen for a long moment. He had fought the swarm before. He had seen entire fleets consumed by the nightmare creatures that existed between dimensions. He had watched colonies burn as the swarm fed on every living thing they could reach. "Has the council detected them yet?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. Our intelligence suggests they are currently focused on their internal conflicts. Even if they have detected the swarm, they may not recognize what they are seeing." Darjon considered his options. Protocol required him to report any major threats to civilian leadership. But there was no protocol for threats to a foreign government that had expelled you. Prepare a full analysis for the Prime Minister, and continue monitoring. Do not transmit any warnings to Council space. The intelligence officer hesitated. "Sir, if we do not warn them, we have no obligation to warn them," Daejung said flatly. "They made that very clear 6 months ago. Continue monitoring and report any changes." The swarm moved through Council space like a cancer, consuming everything in its path. The first indication that something was wrong came when supply ships failed to arrive from the Rim colonies. When investigation ships were sent, they found empty worlds. No bodies, no destruction. Just silence. It took the council 2 weeks to understand what was happening. By then, Swarm had consumed 43 worlds and was accelerating toward the core systems. The Vrathan. Overseer convened an emergency military council. Every admiral, general, and strategic officer in council space was summoned. They gathered in the war room beneath council headquarters, a chamber that had not been used since the last Swarm War 30 years ago. Admiral Vrish stood before the assembled officers and presented the tactical situation. It was not good. The Swarm was advancing on multiple fronts. Their numbers were overwhelming, and the Council's military was already weakened and scattered from the Morgothi conflict. "We must deploy everything we have," the Overseer declared. "Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. This is an extinction-level threat." A Brazilian general named Tavik spoke up. "Honored Overseer, forgive my directness, but our fleet is not ready for this. We lack the strategic coordination. We lack the defensive technology. We lack the experience. The last time we faced the Swarm, humans led the defense. Without them, we will manage without them," the Overseer snapped. "We have their tactical databases. We have officers they trained. We have the same weapons they used. We will adapt their strategies and prevail." But Tavik shook his head. "Respectfully, sir, having the tactics and understanding them are not the same thing. Colonel Jinho used to say that strategy was not about memorizing moves, but understanding why they work. We have memorized the moves. We do not understand the why." Silence fell across the war room. Every officer present knew that Tavik was right, but pride prevented them from admitting it. The first major battle occurred at the Nexus Convergence, a strategic system that controlled access to 12 other systems. The Council deployed its largest fleet, over 2,000 ships representing dozens of species. Admiral Vreshek commanded from the flagship Unity, trying to implement the defensive formations that humans had used 30 years ago. The Swarm arrived in numbers that blotted out the stars. They came from every direction at once, moving with coordination that suggested a single vast intelligence controlling millions of individual creatures. Vreshig gave the order to engage, and the Council fleet moved into formation. For the first hour, it seemed to be working. The defensive perimeter held. The Swarm took heavy casualties. Hope flickered among the Council forces. Then the Swarm adapted. The creatures shifted their tactics, exploiting weaknesses in the formation that Vresh did not even know existed. Ships that should have provided covering fire were out of position. Communication between different species, vessels broke down under stress. The careful coordination required for human tactics simply was not there. The Swarm broke through the perimeter in 6 places simultaneously. What had been an organized defense became a chaotic brawl. Ships fought individually instead of as a unified force. The Swarm cut them down like wheat. Vreshik ordered a retreat, but it was too late. The Swarm had surrounded them. Of the 2,000 ships that entered the battle, fewer than 800 escaped. The Council had lost its main fleet in a single engagement. In the aftermath, as the survivors limped back to safe harbors, the true scope of the disaster became clear. Without the Nexus Convergence, there was no defensive line between the Swarm and the Council core worlds, and there were no more fleets left to stop them. The Vrathan Overseer sat alone in his office, compound eyes staring at casualty reports that seemed to never end. Over 100 billion beings dead or missing. Dozens of worlds consumed. The greatest military defeat in Council history. A8 entered quietly. "Honored Overseer, the Council has voted. They wish to invoke Emergency Protocol 1. The Overseer knew what that meant. A formal request for human military intervention. The very thought made him sick with shame. But what choice was there? "Prepare a delegation," he said quietly. "I will lead it myself." The journey to Earth took 3 days. The Overseer had never left his homeworld before this crisis. Now he traveled to the human homeworld to beg for help from the species he had threatened and expelled. Earth was beautiful. He had not expected that. From orbit, he could see blue oceans and green continents, white clouds and city lights. It looked peaceful and welcoming, nothing like the military fortress he had imagined. Ambassador Sujin received the delegation in the Human Diplomatic Center, a building of simple design that spoke of function over grandeur. She stood behind a plain desk. Wearing the same blue uniform that Hyenwu had worn 6 months ago, the overseer entered with a delegation of 5 other species: a Kelthran, a Priscillian, a Morgothi, a Zenthari, and a Vrathanade. They represented what remained of council leadership. Ambassador Sujin, the overseer, began, his translator rendering his clicking speech into human language. "We come to request assistance. The Void Swarm has returned. Our defenses have failed. We need humanity's help." Sujin's expression remained neutral. "You requested our technology. We refused and offered our service instead. You rejected that offer and demanded we leave. We complied. I am not certain what more you want from us." The Kelthran delegate, a female named Thesa, stepped forward. "Billions are dying, Ambassador. You have a moral obligation to help those in need." "We had an obligation to our allies," Sujin replied quietly. "The Council severed that alliance. We have no obligation to you now." The Preslian governor, Telish himself, fell to his knees. It was a gesture of absolute submission in his culture, something no Priscillian had done to another species in recorded history. "Please, Ambassador. We were wrong. We admit our mistakes. We need you. Our people are starving. Our worlds are being consumed. Help us." Sujin looked at the kneeling governor, and for a moment her professional mask cracked. Genuine sadness showed in her eyes. "Your admission comes with billions of lives as the price of tuition. That is a very expensive lesson." She walked to the window and looked out at Earth cities. "You believed humanity was arrogant for withholding the quantum disruption technology. You did not understand that we withheld it because we knew this day would come. We knew the swarm would return. We knew you would be unprepared. And we knew that giving you weapons you did not understand would only make things worse." She turned back to face them. "We are not your protectors. We are not your parents. We are not your superior species. We offered partnership, and you demanded servitude. Now you have neither." The overseer's mandibles trembled. "What do you want? Resources? Territory? Reparations? Name your price." "We want nothing," Sujin said simply. "That is what you fail to understand. Humanity does not need the Council. We never did. We participated because we believed in the ideal of cooperation. You taught us that ideal was an illusion. Then we will die," Telish whispered from the floor. Sujin returned to her desk and sat down. Perhaps you will learn what humanity learned centuries ago. That survival requires more than technology. It requires unity, sacrifice, and the wisdom to know when you are outmatched. We cannot give you those things." The delegation stood in shocked silence. They had come expecting negotiations. They had prepared arguments. They had calculated what they could offer. None of it mattered. Humanity's answer was no. The Council delegation left Earth in silence. They had come with hope and left with nothing. The journey back to Council space took 3 days. And during that time, the swarm consumed 19 more worlds. The remaining Council forces gathered for one final stand. Every available ship, every soldier, every weapon, they assembled at a system called Meridian Point, chosen because it was the last defensible position before the swarm reached the most populated regions of Council space. Admiral Vershek stood on the bridge of his new flagship, looking at tactical displays that showed impossible odds. The swarm outnumbered them 5-1. The Council forces were exhausted, demoralized, and commanded by officers who had watched their best strategies fail, but there was nowhere left to run. The battle began at dawn. The swarm emerged from hyperspace in a formation that defied understanding, moving as one vast organism with billions of parts. The Council fleet opened fire with everything they had. For a brief moment, it seemed possible that courage alone might be enough. The Council forces fought with desperate intensity, knowing that their families and homes lay behind them. Ships rammed swarm clusters when their weapons ran out. Soldiers kept firing even as their vessels were torn apart. Admiral Vreshk tried to coordinate the defense, but the chaos was too great. Species that had never fought well together struggled to communicate under stress. Tactics fell apart. Ships collided with allies. The careful formations dissolved into individual struggles for survival. The swarm pressed forward relentlessly. They adapted to every tactic, countered every strategy, exploited every weakness. The Council fleet began to break. Veshek watched his tactical display with growing horror. They were losing. Not just this battle, but everything. In a few more hours, the swarm would break through, and the core worlds would fall. Galactic civilization would end. He reached for the communication console to give the retreat order. It was pointless, but at least some ships might escape. His hand was halfway to the control when every screen on the bridge went black. Then a single message appeared, transmitted on every frequency in every language spoken by Council species. Attention Council forces. This is Admiral Dayung of the Human Defense Fleet. Human defensive perimeter has been established at coordinates 7-7-Mark-3-2. You are authorized to retreat to human protection. Non-military vessels will be granted immediate sanctuary. Military vessels will be incorporated into joint defensive operations under human command. You have 12 hours to comply. After that window, we cannot guarantee safe passage through swarm territory. The message ended. For 3 heartbeats, the bridge of Reshki's flagship was completely silent. Then his sensor officer shouted, "Admiral, new contacts." Thousands of them, jumping in behind the swarm formation. The tactical display came back online, and Vreshk saw something he had never expected to see again. Human warships. Hundreds of them. The distinctive profiles of Earth defense fleet cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and dreadnoughts. All around the swarm formation, human vessels appeared from hyperspace in perfect coordination. Admiral Dayung sat in his command chair aboard the Indomitable, watching his fleet execute the maneuver they had been practicing for 6 months. Since the day humanity left Council space, he had been preparing for this moment. All ships, weapons free. Target swarm command clusters. Deploy quantum disruption on my mark. Across the human fleet, weapons systems that the Council had never seen activated. The quantum disruption technology was not a single weapon, but a network of coordinated devices that created interference patterns in the swarm's collective consciousness. The effect was immediate and devastating. The swarm formation, which had moved with such terrifying coordination, suddenly became thousands of individual clusters with no central direction. They thrashed and collided with each other, confused and vulnerable. Human ships pressed the advantage. Weapons designed specifically to fight the swarm tore through the confused creatures. Tactics refined through centuries of human warfare cut the swarm formations into manageable pieces.